So that's what I mean by that intuitive relationship, where they actually can attune to what their body is telling them and say, I've had enough. I'm feeling satisfied. I'm feeling full. I don't want this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that they can self-regulate in that way when we give them the space and the opportunity to do that.
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, and no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hey, it's Danielle. Halloween is just 2 days away, and good parents everywhere are understandably worried about managing the incoming onslaught of sugar from trick-or-treating. Thankfully, my guest today, Nicole Cruz, is here to take some weight off your shoulders and the pressure off so you can enjoy Halloween just as much as your kids. Nicole is the founder of Nourish Together, a shame-free approach to family nutrition. As a registered dietitian and mom of 3, she combines her personal and professional experience to support parents in raising confident eaters who can eat a variety, listen to their body cues, and not obsess over sweets or other treats. She believes the foundation of healthy eating is first having a healthy relationship with food, and that together we can bring more joy and less stress to the table. We start off our conversation today naming many of the understandable fears around sugar and how sometimes it's our fears that end up exacerbating the fascination. Nicole shared 2 really important factors that help take sugar off its pedestal and teach a more intuitive eating approach. Then we narrowed in on the night of the holiday and what she professionally recommends for how to handle the candy when you get home, whether or not she recommends the Switch Witch, and what it looks like to encourage intuitive eating year-round. Please enjoy this conversation with Nicole, and happy trick-or-treating. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on this episode, I'm joined by Nicole Cruz, registered dietitian and a sweets expert. And we just came across each other, actually, but I wanted to invite her on for a super quick bonus episode of Failing Motherhood since Halloween is here. And we are just stressed about all of the chocolate that is about to ensue. So welcome, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining me real quick today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk all things, sweets, Halloween candy, all of it.
Yes. Okay. So before we dive in, real quick, just introduce yourself to my listeners. Who are you and who's in your family?
Yeah. So I'm Nicole Cruz. I am a registered dietitian and parent nutrition coach. I used to have a brick and mortar business seeing clients one-to-one, and now I have an online practice really specializing in helping parents raise their kids to have a healthy relationship with food, from veggies to sweets, all foods included. I just celebrated actually my 16th anniversary. So I've been married 16 years to my husband, and I have 3 kids who are now 7, 10, and 12 years old.
Awesome. Well, you're a perfect fit for being able to help us with some of these fears. So I want to just dive in right away. What are some of the common fears that your clients and, parents that end up seeking out your resources have, especially when it comes to dessert and sweets and sugar in general?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's 2, well, it's kind of like the physical health piece. So a lot of parents are just really worried about the health of sugar, that it's going to cause diabetes, that it's going to make their kids unhealthy. We get so much messaging around how it's like toxic and it's poisonous and it's creating all of these health issues for us. So they're really worried that if their child has too much of it, then they're going to be unhealthy physically. And then they're also worried about how to manage it in the sense of like, if their kid eats it, they're never going to stop eating it, that they're going to have too much of it, that it's addictive in nature. They're worried that, that their taste buds are going to get used to that and they're just going to keep wanting like more and more of it. And the other side of that is parents are also worried about making it a bigger issue than it is. So they just feel kind of stuck on how to manage it all because they don't want to create that forbidden fruit effect, but they also don't know what else to do because they're worried about the health implications of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is there also parents that feel like there's a correlation between their child's sugar intake and then their behavior afterwards?
Yes, absolutely. That's a huge one around feeling like they're hyperactive sometimes, which can be part of it, or that they just have like meltdowns, that they act like a different child when they have too much sugar. So, absolutely. And especially then that comes into play like, well, then I don't want them to have it at night or before they go to bed, or I just don't want them to have too much at the birthday party or whatever,
Right.
because then I have to deal with that all afternoon. So, yes, absolutely.
Right. And for parents that are having these thoughts and these fears and going down these rabbit holes of research, what do you want to just validate for them? As in, like, it's understandable and you already are asking good questions as a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, like, I know that everything's with the best of intentions, right? Like, we
Mm-hmm.
absolutely love our children. We want the best for them. We want them to be happy, to be healthy, to feel good in their bodies, all of that. So it makes
Mm-hmm.
so much sense. Like, you are a loving and caring parent who wants to do this right, who really wants to help your kid both be able to like be around sugar and sweets and not be crazy or obsessive, to eat an amount that feels good, and you
Mm-hmm.
want them to feel good and be healthy in their body and have energy and to really grow and thrive. So I
Yeah.
absolutely understand that. And again, we're always just doing our best with the information that we have at any given moment. And there's so much to sort through in this culture. Like I said
Oh
before,
my
sugar
gosh,
is
yes.
just like out there. I mean, I've literally had an assignment come home from school that was like, sugar is toxic, sugar is poison. And so we're
Mm-hmm.
getting this message from the pediatrician, from teachers, from coaches, from, you know, the media everywhere about how horrible sugar is and how we need to
Yeah.
limit it and manage it. So
Yeah.
I just want to say it's really confusing. It's really hard to know how to best do it. So I feel that for the parents. And honestly, I'm a parent of 3 kids myself trying to
Mm-hmm.
navigate this culture. So like I get it too. I mean, I feel
Yes.
confident in my approach at this point on how I do it, but I
Yeah.
absolutely relate and understand what we're living with.
Yes, yes. And so thank you for taking that moment. And that being said, what do you really love to be able to share with parents to kind of abate some of those fears? As in, are there some myths that you can help debunk and add clarity to all of the conflicting information they might have been exposed to already?
Yeah. And I know this is kind of a short-ish podcast episode, and we can't really deep dive into some of
Hmm.
it quite as much. And some of it might sound a little bit controversial. So I just want to put that out that like I hope that you can kind of open your ears and maybe take a little bit of this in and not shut it down when it feels like, oh my gosh, but I'm so clear that sugar is horrible and we shouldn't have it and all of that, to maybe just
Yeah.
open up and say like, okay, what if, we could handle it or think about it in a different way? Because what I want to say the number one thing is that oftentimes our fears around sugar actually perpetuate the issues that we're so worried about happening. And that's the biggest thing that I see. I have parents come to me all the time and say, like, my kid is obsessed with sweets. That's all they would eat if I let them. I have to cut them off. I've had parents coming to me saying they will eat so much that they'll vomit. They're just like really obsessive with sweets. And once we start handling sugar in a different way, their kid does not have this same quote unquote addictive behavior that they were seeing. So a lot of it is actually in the dynamics with sweets and how we are parenting around it than sugar actually being this molecule that creates all of this, that it's toxic and it's poison and it's horrendous and it's addictive, all of that. It's really
Mm-hmm.
actually in the dynamics around it. And so the number one thing that I say is most important is actually our children's relationship with sugar and how we are interacting with it, how we're talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
that's creating some of these dynamics. So I can talk more about that, but do you have any like thoughts, questions, or follow up around that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree that it's always the things that we don't want to see more of as a parent that we end up fixating on. And then that does end up creating this self-fulfilling prophecy in the wrong direction. I talk to parents about this about things like lying or, things like saying bad words. The bigger a deal we make it, the bigger deal it is to our kids. And it's like this like rolling ball of momentum. And it actually is creating exactly what we were fearing in the first place. And so I really relate to you describing it as it's not the molecule itself that's like this big evil force, but it's the relationship to it and how it's kind of the whole PR campaign around it, really. So I think that that's a really important thing to clarify. And what is the goal? I think I've heard you use the term like intuitive eating. Can you describe what that like end goal that we really have for our kids is that we want to focus on?
Yeah. So I talk about that kind of in the sense of all food, but when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
sweets, like I can give you the example that my kids who have access to sugar, and let me say this too. Again, I know, we're keeping this kind of concise, so I'm not going to go into all of the pieces around it. I absolutely believe that as parents, we should parent with food. We should have some guidelines. We should have some structure with it. We are not just saying, eat whatever you want, whenever you want and I don't care, it's hands off. It actually is
Mm-hmm.
creating a supportive structure around it, but not making sugar be like the forbidden fruit. We don't want to deem it that way, right? We are just talking about the
Mm-hmm.
energy around it, all of that. So what I can say is with the structure that we put in place around it, like I will see my kids get candy at the baseball snack bar and have some of it and then hand it back to me and say, I'm done. I've had enough. I don't want any more. Can you save this for me? Or throw
Mm-hmm.
three-quarters of a slushie away because they're just like, oh, it's too sweet. I don't want it anymore. Right. And it's not just my
Yeah.
kids. I've helped, you know, hundreds of parents with this at this point do the same thing. So the way that we are setting that up. So that's what I mean by that intuitive relationship where they actually can attune to what their body is telling them and say, I've had enough. I'm feeling satisfied. I'm feeling full. I don't want this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that they can self-regulate in that way when we give them the space and the opportunity to do that. And again, I know that there are parents saying like, absolutely not my kid. My kid would never do that unless I cut them off, right? Unless I stop them. And again, I'm not saying that we should make it be a free for all because
Mm-hmm.
sweets do taste good and kids sometimes will just gravitate towards that because it's easy. It's easier to open up a package of candy than it is to go cut up an apple or they see it and it looks good in the moment. Like we
Yeah.
do want to support them around that. So I'm not saying that, but when given the opportunity within the structure to say, okay, here we're having some cookies tonight or whatever it might be, that when they have that more neutral and balanced relationship with sweets because they know they're not off limits, they're allowed to have them regularly. Doesn't mean every single meal and snack, but they're allowed to have them regularly that they can stop when they've had enough because they know they're not going anywhere.
Yeah. So talk more about that concept of like when we tell them they can't have it, then it's all they want. And kind of what are the goals that help take it off the pedestal that is kind of the opposite of that forbidden fruit mentality?
Yeah. So it's kind of like anything, right? Just our human behavior. When we tell our kids that they can't have something, they want it even more. Or when they see, I always laugh, right? I went to this preschool. It was kind of like a co-op style preschool with all of my kids. And so parents had to work in class part of the time, some of the days.
Mm-hmm.
And we were taught around conflict resolution, so we'd have two kids sitting there, both wanting the same toy. And we'd go and we'd work out this whole plan about, okay, well, she wants to have it for 2 minutes. And then you could, right? And we'd have the kids
Mm-hmm.
lead this and we'd set up the structure. And then the one kid is like, okay, it's my turn. And as soon as they have the toy, they're like, I don't want to play with it anymore. And they're off, right? But when it's like this battle between both of them really
Mm-hmm.
wanting it, they're just going to dig their heels in more and more because the other kid wants it too. And that's the same with us when it comes to sweets. If we're like, no, you can't have it, you're not allowed to have it, they just fixate on wanting to get it even more and more. And now they're
Mm-hmm.
actually reacting to that limit. They're reacting to that sense of restriction and scarcity instead of attuning to their own body cues to say, do I even want it? How much have I had? Have I had enough? Do I feel good in my body? And so
Mm.
that's what I mean by that like reactive nature around it, to just
Yeah.
dig in and want it more and more and more. And so I think you asked around like, well, how do we kind of take it off of that pedestal or not make it be on that pedestal? So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things is availability. We actually do have to give them access to sweets and not just say, you can only have it at parties or something. And then we don't bring it in our home. If we don't bring it in our home ever, we are creating the sense that it's this food that we're not allowed to have. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that looks different for everybody. Some families do dessert every single night, and that works for them. Other families do it a couple times a week, and it's just not a big deal. So it isn't this hard and fast. You need to have sweets this often, this many times, right? I think as
Yeah.
parents, sometimes we really want to have those specific guidelines or rules. Well, how much is too much, or how much should I be doing it? And
Yes.
I don't have
Just tell
this
me I'm
like
doing it
hard and
right.
fast rule. Yes, exactly. Exactly. I do tell parents if their kid seems really obsessive about it, I do recommend trying to include some sort of sweet at least once a day so that they're getting used to like, nope, you are allowed to have it, whether that's putting cookies in the lunchbox or having something, brownies with dinner or a scoop of ice
Mm-hmm.
cream or whatever it might be, that we're making it more accessible and saying like, we'll have more again tomorrow. We can say that, right? We'll have more again
Yep.
tomorrow. So we're really showing them it's coming again and again. So part of it is access. Now, some parents will say, well, my kid gets sweets all the time and they're still obsessive about it. Part of it is also the language that we're using around it. Are we giving them sugar, but saying, like, oh, we really shouldn't be eating this? It's unhealthy. You shouldn't have too much.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have sweets, then you need to eat your broccoli first. Like, are we bribing
Yes.
with it? Are we taking it away as a punishment or using it as a reward? So, some of it is we might be giving it to them regularly. They do have access, but it's the way that we're talking about it, the way we're making them earn it, the energy around it that also
Mm-hmm.
can create that sense of still scarcity around it, that sense of deprivation or like I have to earn it.
Yep.
So it could be both pieces. One is access, the other is the way that we're like navigating it and setting it up. And I always ask parents, like, even if you're not sure, I want you to think about how your child might feel about it. Do they feel like
Yeah.
sugar's just another food? They're allowed to have it. It's not that big of a deal or not? So like your kids' energy around it, the way you think they feel about it will give you a lot of clues about that too.
Mm, that is so true because the intentions we have, and even maybe some of even the messaging we're using, might not at all be the way that it feels on their end or what they hear. And what's more important is not just our good intentions, but what actually is the message that's coming across and the story they're telling themselves and the way that they feel like their reactions or behavior is justified and necessary and appropriate based on the culture we've created around it. And it's always much more complex than just a one-time explanation about our family's policy around this. And so I love being able to kind of name that nuance because sometimes you do just need to zoom out and kind of get in their shoes and think about it in a little bit of a different lens so that we can find that missing piece of why can't we seem to get to the other side of this or kind of break through the vicious cycle that it seems like I get into. And I'm a broken record of explaining this to my kid. And so love that point. So true. And now diving even deeper into Halloween is just in a couple days. What do you suggest as to how parents can help feel good about how they handle candy that night and beyond?
Uh, Absolutely. So The first thing is on Halloween night, I do recommend that you don't have any like limits or guardrails around it because they just went out and they got all of this candy and it feels really exciting. And picking some arbitrary amount they can have. I've heard parents say, I heard you should do as many pieces of it as they are old, or just like some random number or something. It is going to feel, they'll be like, I can only have 2 pieces or I can only have 5 pieces. Like they just got all this candy that they're so excited about. So I do recommend on Halloween night really allowing them to just have their candy and to not put limits or guidelines or anything around how much. A couple things I like to do to support with that, though, is one, serve dinner before you go out trick or treating. Sometimes they're so excited they're not going to eat much, but keep that dinner out for when you get home or warm some solid food up. And don't choose a meal that your kids just kind of like get pizza, get like
Yeah.
something that they're
Hot dog
going
that
to
night.
want to eat that like you're not going to be like, oh, it's the I don't know, chicken casserole they sometimes eat and sometimes hate, right? Like
Yeah.
choose something they really like so that you're giving them some solid food in their system so they're not actually so hungry that they truly just want to fill up on hungry from a physiological perspective or on candy from a physiological perspective. So try to feed them a good meal. I like to put like a receptacle out or something that's saying, if you don't like a candy or if you try it and you don't want it, throw it in here. Like show them
Mm.
like you have a place to get rid of it. If there's or a trading pile, if there's something you don't like, put it in the trading pile. Put the trash here. I've noticed that my kids sometimes will do that. They will take a bite and be like, I don't like this because they see the trash right there. It's easier to just throw it in and say like, nope, I just want to try a bite of that one. Then I want to try a bite of this one. Then I want to try a bite of this one. But they're not
Yeah.
eating all the bars. They're just excited at the variety and kind of trying it all. So when they have that visual reminder there, they can toss it in if they want. So
Mm.
I like to put out something like that. I remind them, like, and we don't want to harp on this. So I'm always hesitant because if you have put a lot of pressure on your kids around candy in the past or really limited, you stepping in and saying something might make them feel like you're trying to restrict it. So
Mhm.
we don't want to harp on them, like, just listen to your body, just listen to your body, just listen to your, like, where they're like, stop talking to me, right? Stop talking to me.
Yes.
But it's not a bad thing to be able to say, or if they come to you and say, can I have more, to be sure you can, just check in with your tummy, how are you feeling, right? Or to give them that little reminder of, hey, just check in with your tummy, see how much you want, we're going to be able to have more tomorrow. Just remind them of those
Mm.
things too. So
Mhm.
there's that. I know some people engage in like the switch witch and will take the candy and pretend like the magical witch is going to come take it away and trade it in for a toy, or they donate it. um I'm not inherently opposed to that if the child wants to do that and they're like, I don't like these candies. Let me get rid of those candies and you want to swap it for a book or something? Great. I
Mhm.
don't like using it as a tool to restrict your child's candy, make them get rid of it, anything like that. So I say that because if you want to engage in this, you could tell them, oh, we're going to do the switch or something. So if there's candy you don't like, put it in this pile over here. And then we can swap it out for a toy or something or a book. But
Yeah.
we don't want to do it with, you're only allowed to choose 5 pieces. And then guess what? We're going to put it out for the switch, if that makes sense. Just like
Yeah.
that distinguishing piece. So we could do something like put all the ones you don't want here and we can trade them or something like that, or do trade them for a toy or something.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that first night, though? I can talk more about how to handle
Mhm.
it moving forward. But
I'm so glad you brought that up because I think even the worst case is doing that type of swap without their consent at all. As in, like, they wake up the next morning and then all the candy's gone and switched out, or given to someone else, or I think that you do lose a lot of trust. And what are we really winning when we're willing to kind of put that parent-child relationship in jeopardy to just try to manipulate the cards? And what we're hoping this conversation can do is just open your eyes enough to take that pressure and that weight off your shoulders from feeling like this, like how you manage sugar in your home is such a huge responsibility that you need to go to these lengths to get it out of your house or to get it out of your conversations. But instead, we want you to just feel comfortable with it and to know that it's just one aspect of their life that the more neutrally and normally we can talk about and handle and integrate into day-to-day life, the better. because otherwise we're giving it more power than it needs to have. And that's going to do us a disservice because now we're fighting in a way more uphill battle against that idea of the scarcity and the uncertainty around it. Because then it's just creating this pedestal and this fascination. So go ahead and dive into more of kind of then into the future.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that, Danielle, because I have parents say, like, I feel irresponsible as a parent if I'm letting my kids have all of these sweets or all of this sugar. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's so important to recognize, like, actually, what you're really doing is you're building trust in the relationship. You're letting them know sugar is available. That's not irresponsible. They're going to have a lifetime of learning to manage food, including sugar and sweets. So that's not being
Yeah.
irresponsible, you trying to control it. You're trying to set them up for success. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad you touched on that piece because I think it's confusing. Again, going back to like it's so hard and we really want to do the best for them, you know?
We do.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. But we'd hate for their first time, understanding what it looks like to eat to the point of full with sweets is like when they go off to college or something, right?
Exactly, which is exactly why on the night of, if they do get overfull or they do get a stomach ache or something, that's just a learning experience. That's something for them to be able to go like, oh, that didn't feel so great, you know? And I've had
Mm-hmm.
my kids say that, eat like get the Easter basket, eat a lot, and say like, oh, my tummy hurts. And I've heard them repeat that. Like then they've gotten a bag of candy a few days later, maybe the other one did. And I specifically remember my son telling my other son, he's like, remember when I ate all of that Easter candy? You probably don't want to eat it too fast. You know, like they remember
Right.
that from their experiences, they're going to remember far more than us lecturing and controlling and all of that. So,
Yeah.
it's okay if they do eat more than feels good. They're going to learn from that more than us just like cutting them off or limiting it. So,
Ugh, I feel like that is a permission slip, and that's going to feel good for parents to hear. Very reassuring if they have felt like they are, that parent that's not doing enough. So, is there any other language that you can kind of offer as examples of how to handle some of those conversations going forward?
yeah. Well, one of the things I would say is what not to do. I always like us to check in on kind of like, we don't want to say things like, you've had enough, or you shouldn't have any more, or it's too much. Things like that that suggest it's bad, they shouldn't be eating it, that sort of thing. And so instead, we want to actually remind them there will always be more. You can always have more tomorrow. We want to treat it really neutrally, like candy is just a different food group. I love the word variety when talking
Mm-hmm.
about food. So instead of saying like you need more of this or you should have this or this is healthy, this is unhealthy, we can talk about how our body needs a variety of nutrients. If we only ate candy, that wouldn't feel good in our body and we wouldn't get the nutrients we needed. Just like if we only ate broccoli, we wouldn't get the nutrients that we needed and we wouldn't feel good in our body. So we
Mm-hmm.
really need a variety of nutrients as well and a variety of different foods. So I think it's pointing them back to check in with their body, saying things like, I trust you to eat the amount that you need or that you want. To talk about variety and to really avoid any sort of arbitrary judgment. And we say, just call food what it is. Call it candy or call it sweets. It's sweet. That's a like concrete term for kids. It's sweet
Yeah.
versus
Mm-hmm.
some arbitrary, like this is a sometimes food or this is a fun food. What does that mean? And why can't strawberries be fun? Like I don't
Yeah.
like these arbitrary terms. We just want to use concrete either descriptors to describe how it tastes or what it looks like, or an actual specific food group, fruit, vegetable, meat, grain, like that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, variety. I feel like that's a great one. Sometimes we talk about just balance. How what have we had today? How many different foods have we eaten today? I'm continually surprised by my kids, honestly, of being 10 and 11, how they're really able to moderate where we do have access to a lot of things. We just made it a excessive amount of caramel apples because we got a ton of apples from the orchard, and they're just sitting on the counter and have been. They're covered in M&Ms and M's and chocolate chips and nuts, and they're asking maybe one every other day, to eat one after school, and it's just normal. They're just sitting there, and we're all just kind of finding it times to eat them, and they'll be great about they had fudge at school because they made this like homemade recipe that's like teamwork, and it's a whole thing. And so it's like friendship fudge day, and they were so excited to come home with friendship fudge. And then my daughter ate hers on the way home, and then she was like, "Oh, mom, can I have a caramel apple?" And I just said, um do you think so? Like, do you want that? I think is what I said. Do you want that? I know you just had your friendship fudge. And she was like, "Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. No, that's gonna be too much sweet. Like, that's just that. I don't, you're right. I don't want that." She just saw it on the counter. And then she was totally fine. Like, it was not a power struggle, it was not a big deal. And I think that's those little illustrations of what we hope to be able to cultivate is just a sense of normalcy around these conversations where it doesn't feel like I need to wield power and control, or the food has all this power and control, but we can just manage it as a family in a way where everybody is able to read what's best for themselves, in ways that help them feel healthy and comfortable and strong and all those things. So I know that that's the goal we're looking for. And if parents have more questions on this, because I think Halloween is only the springboard for a lot of this topic, and we're going into even more holidays to come. So please share with listeners some of the resources you offer and how they can get connected to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I think we didn't keep talking about like what to keep doing with it. So my sweets guide, it's called My Kid Has a Sweet Tooth, actually talks about not specifically Halloween so much, but just how you want to handle sweets in general. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really what we want to do with Halloween candy is we want to give them access to it. But it's okay to just say we're going to have that with the next snack or with the meal. It doesn't have to be they just get access to it all the time in the days coming where they're going to end up filling up on that and not eating some of their other food or that sort of thing. And,
Mm-hmm.
you really described too, they're 10 and 11. So you're going to start engaging in these conversations, helping them make those decisions at that age. Whereas with a 4-year-old, you're probably just going to say something more like, we'll have that with snack. That's not on the
Mm-hmm.
menu right now. And then you're just going to serve them what is on the menu. And then you're going to give them candy at the next snack or whatever it might be. We're not able to engage, with a 4-year-old around making those decisions. So,
Right.
um, so if you get the sweets guide, it will show you kind of how you want to navigate sweets as a whole. And that's what we want to do. Give them access on the first night to their candy, let them have it. And then in the days coming, it's probably going to be a bit more than maybe what you even think they should have, or a bit more than what you're comfortable with. But I always say we want to lean into it. We want to give them permission to have it and still have some structure around it, that it's not a free for all. So let them have a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more than you're probably comfortable with, lean into that, and still have some boundaries around it. So yes, grab the free guide. My Kid Has a Sweet Tooth. That will help give you some of those parameters for moving forward with all of it. You can also follow me on Instagram at Nicole Cruz RD. And if you actually go on Instagram and you DM me the word cupcake, you will get the download for the sweets guide right there too. So that's another way
There
just
we
to
go.
access it.
Okay, two birds in stone. Love it. So I know I've just had you for a short amount of time, but I want to ask you the question I ask every guest that comes on: failing motherhood. How are you the mom your kids need?
I think that's a big, big question. I think through how am I the mom my kids need? Um, Gosh, it's hard to feel like you're the mom that your kids need sometimes. I feel like, like
Hmm.
clearly, Danielle, you understand what the name of your podcast is,
Yep.
Failing Mother. But it's so hard like to feel like we're doing things really well for ourselves. But I mean, one of the things that I do is I definitely do take time for myself every single day. And that's usually in the form of movement. So I go out by a walk for myself, or I do a yoga video by myself, or whatever the thing is. But I
Mhm.
do make that space, and I feel like it starts my day well, and I'm really committed to it. So that's the biggest thing. I feel like I can like get my thoughts out, get the racing out for the day, and be a little
Mhm.
bit more present to be with them.
That's great. Yeah, that's just one little example of how they are lucky to have you, recognizing that, prioritizing that, having that awareness that you are a better parent for that when you do that. And we can all be encouraged by that as well. So Thank you so much, Nicole, for being here. We so appreciate your expertise and the permission to take this weight off our shoulders that you have given us. We can go into Halloween even more excited to enjoy some candy ourselves. So don't forget to take that parent tax as well. 1 or 2 just for you. But thanks again, Nicole. I'll share all those resources in the show notes and make sure to point people your way in the future. But keep up your hard work, and thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Failing Motherhood. Your kids are so lucky to have you. If you loved this episode, take a screenshot right now and share it in your Instagram stories and tag me. If you're loving the podcast, be sure that you've subscribed and leave a review so we can help more moms know that they are not alone if they feel like they're failing motherhood on a daily basis. And if you're ready to transform your relationship with your strong-willed child and invest in the support you need to make it happen, schedule your free consultation using the link in the show notes. I can't wait to meet you. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.